As I walked away from their laughter, I heard them say, "She will be forgotten by all but herself." I smiled quietly. Ages later, when the maps were redrawn, the calendars rewritten, and languages remade, the historians still spoke my name not out of loyalty, but because the future itself had been shaped by a girl they once dismissed as nothing more than a moment in passing. I was 17 when I heard it. I had just given a presentation in AP Government. I had stayed up all night working on its stats, graphics, even a quote from the Constitution that tied everything together. I thought I did okay. Maybe even good. The class was silent when I finished. But when I walked back to my seat, I heard them. Rachel, Kinsey, Eric, the usual group who always sat together in the back. "She'll be forgotten by all but herself," Rachel said. I stopped in my tracks. My desk was only a few feet away, but I froze. They laughed. Like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I didn't turn around. I didn't say a word. I just sat down slowly and stared ahead like nothing happened. But something did. Something broke and twisted inside me. Like a door finally shut for good. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not the one teacher I liked. I didn't cry after school. I didn't even flinch. But that sentence stayed in my head, carved in like a scar. That's when I knew. I'd make sure the world remembered me. Even if it hated me for it. I'm from Quincy, Illinois. You've probably never been there unless your car broke down on the way to somewhere else. Small town right by the Mississippi River. There's a Walmart, 3 subways, and a couple of strip malls slowly rotting like old fruit. My parents were tired people. Not bad, just beaten down by life. My mom cleaned houses. My dad fixed microwaves and fridges in a little repair shop that barely brought in enough to cover the bills. They didn't have time for anything that wasn't survival. School was a mess. I wasn't popular. But I wasn't invisible either, not the way they meant. I was the kind of girl people noticed just enough to make fun of. Too smart, too quiet, too plain. I wore the same jeans 3 times a week, and shoes with the soles starting to peel. I kept to myself mostly because every time I tried to join in I got that fake smile, that slow turn of the head, the whisper followed by laughter I wasn't meant to hear. But I heard everything. "She looks like she smells like wet books. Watch out, she's gonna snap one day." Maybe if she smiled, but like who'd want that? I worked harder than anyone else. I had a 4.2 GPA, top of the class, editor of the school paper, debate team captain, and a regular volunteer at the local shelter. I did it all thinking it would make a difference. It didn't. The only thing it did was make the mean ones meaner. So I stopped trying to be liked. I just worked. I worked like I was building a ladder out of that place, one broken rung at a time. When I graduated, no one clapped extra loud. No scholarships in my name. No awards beyond the ones they couldn't deny me. But I had one thing: they couldn't touch a full ride to a tech program in St. Louis. They probably thought I'd drop out. Probably joked about me in their group chats. I never looked back. College was different. Not easier, God no, but different. Nobody knew me. I could start over. I worked 2 jobs: waitress at a 24-hour diner, and assistant in the computer lab. I barely slept. I coded through the night. Read through every programming language I could get my hands on. I didn't go to parties. I didn't drink. I didn't make friends. I built. The first thing I created was a data sorter for a campus organization. It tracked donation patterns and recommended targets. I sold it for $1,000. That was my rent for 2 months. The second thing was Smarter, an algorithm that mapped emotional response in consumer reviews. A startup bought that for $8,000. I invested all of it. By the time I turned 24, I had 4 different programs running under pseudonyms. Each one doing something different: marketing prediction, social behavior modeling, economic shift analysis. Then I built Foresight. It wasn't flashy. It didn't look like much. But it could predict ripple effects. If you changed one thing in a system, prices, policy, even a word in a public speech, Foresight could track what would happen 5 steps later. I knew it was going to be big. But even I didn't know how big. At 27, I moved to San Francisco. I wore a thrift store blazer and carried my laptop in a backpack with a broken zipper. I walked into rooms full of men with good haircuts and better resumes. But I didn't pitch like they did. I didn't ask them to believe in me. I showed them what Foresight could do, how it predicted which neighborhoods would gentrify next, which trends would die before they started, which political lines would shift. I backed it all with real-time simulations. They didn't care that I looked like I hadn't slept in a week. They saw power. And they paid $1.4 million in seed funding. Then another $8 million in Series A. I built a company from a rented apartment. I slept on the floor while hiring engineers through encrypted chat rooms. I paid people who were hungry and quiet like me. People with something to prove. Within 3 years, my tech was in 12 government systems. It was used by 5 major corporations, 2 media networks, and 1 presidential campaign. I didn't put my name on most of it. But they knew. Everyone who mattered knew. That's when I decided to go back to Quincy. Not for closure. For control. I bought old land factories nobody used, schools that had shut down. I bought the town 1 block at a time through shell companies. When people started talking about a new tech HQ coming to town, they got excited. It was the biggest thing to happen there in decades. The mayor held a press conference. The newspaper ran a headline. Quincy, the future starts here. I walked into that room for the first time in 10 years, wearing a black suit and heels that didn't hurt because I paid $900 for them to be custom made. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I sat down and took their questions. The anchor doing the interview was Stephanie Geller. She was the one who laughed the loudest back then. Her voice didn't shake, but her hand did when she adjusted her notes. You grew up here, right? She asked. Yes, I said. Must feel good to come back home. This isn't home, I said. This is just the place where I started. After the cameras stopped, she leaned in and said, You look different. I looked her dead in the eye. I look exactly the same. You just finally see me. Part 2. Their regrets started too late. A month after I gave that interview, the local newspaper ran a puff piece about me. Called me a hometown success story. Said I was proof the American dream was alive and well. There was even a picture of my old high school with the caption, Where it all began. They didn't know I had already filed the paperwork to buy that building. See, I didn't just want to show up and make money. I wanted to own every inch of what they thought they'd buried me under. I wanted them to know that while they laughed, I was planning. I renamed the school. Didn't bother to hide it. I tore out the football field, replaced it with a research lab, turned the gym into a server farm. Laid off half the old teachers. The ones who used to smirk when I raised my hand in class got their walking papers via email. I replaced them with people who taught data ethics, machine learning, and political systems engineering. The students who used to skate through on last names and cheerleading trophies suddenly couldn't pass midterms. The school board complained. So I bought the school board. Not literally. But I bought enough influence with my money that I didn't have to care what they thought. They held a vote to challenge me. It failed. 5-2. One of the no votes was Eric's dad. Yeah, that Eric. The guy who once told me I looked like a library threw up. I sent him a fruit basket with a note. Thanks for your service. I kept track of them all. Rachel tried to message me through LinkedIn. She worked in marketing at some mid-tier firm in Peoria. Sent a cheerful little note like we were old friends. Wow. So proud of you. Would love to reconnect. I always knew you'd do big things. Let's catch up sometime, smiley face. I blocked her without answering. Kinsey still lived in Quincy. She worked at the hospital as a receptionist. She was one of the first people who applied for a job at my new company. I let her come in for an interview. Made her wait in the lobby for 90 minutes while I finished a fake meeting. Then I brought her into my office. Let her sit down across from me. Watched her squirm. She smiled nervously and said, Wow, this place is amazing. You've really made something special. I leaned forward and said, Do you remember what you said about me sophomore year, after my solo inquire? She blinked. You said I sounded like a dying cat. That I should stick to math, because nobody wanted to hear my voice. Her face went pale. I'm not hiring you, I said. I just wanted you to feel what it's like to be small. She tried to respond, but I waved her out. Didn't even let her finish her sentence. I didn't stop there. I started holding community forums, events meant to show I cared about the town. But they were theater. I scheduled them at awkward times so no one could attend unless they were unemployed. Then I reported the low attendance as proof the town wasn't engaged enough to deserve investment. When federal grants for rural development came through, I rerouted them to the next town over Hamilton. I poured money into their schools, their roads, their tech programs. Soon families started moving out of Quincy. The talent pool dried up. The local paper shut down. The mayor didn't run for re-election. No one ran to replace him. Quincy became a ghost town with high-speed internet. I made sure of it. But it wasn't just about the town anymore. Foresight kept growing. It was used in public safety now, in education policy, even in climate strategy. The algorithms didn't just predict, they guided. One senator called it the backbone of American planning. And still I stayed quiet. I refused awards, turned down interviews. I wanted my name in the systems, not in the speeches. Because it wasn't about fame. It was about control. I didn't need anyone to clap. I just needed them to live in a world I created. But then something happened. A small article came out in an independent journal, one of those pieces nobody reads unless they're looking for a reason to be paranoid. It accused my company of manipulating public opinion by feeding selective information to politicians based on our predictions. It named me directly, said I had built an empire on quiet revenge, said I was reshaping America with the bitterness of a forgotten girl. I laughed when I read it, actually laughed, because they were right. And they were too late to stop it. Part 3. The ones who knew tried to warn them too late. I didn't think that article would go anywhere. It was buried on page 5 of some startup news site. No citations, no real sources. Just a long think piece with an edge of paranoia. But someone must have seen it. Someone important. Because 2 weeks later, I got a request from a subcommittee in D.C. They wanted me to testify. Not about foresight directly, they framed it as a hearing on ethical applications of predictive technology. But the wording was careful and personal. My lawyers told me to decline. I told them to schedule it. I walked into that Capitol building like it was my boardroom. Wore a gray suit. No jewelry. No makeup. No expression. Just me and a hard drive full of numbers. The hearing was televised. They grilled me, asked if my software was being used to subtly influence legislation or manipulate narratives for corporate gain. I answered calmly, we don't manipulate. We show what's already in motion. If they choose to follow the current, that's their decision. They didn't like that. One Senator Mitchell Granger from Iowa leaned forward and said, Miss Delaney, do you understand the power you've created here? Do you understand what it means to steer the future of entire cities, maybe even nations, with no oversight? I looked him in the eye and said, I understand exactly what I've created. Do you? There was silence after that. The clip went viral. Some people called me a genius. Others called me dangerous. But none of them could stop using my tools. Back in Quincy, the last of the factories closed. I bought the land, then turned it into a training center that required 6 certifications to enter, none of which anyone in town had. I knew. I checked. I wasn't just erasing Quincy. I was replacing it. Some of the people who used to torment me started trying to fight back in small ways. Eric posted a rant on Facebook saying I was destroying the soul of the town. Kenzie started a petition to stop the takeover. Rachel filed a formal complaint about my hiring practices. Said I was personally vindictive. They were all right. But none of it stuck. Because I didn't break laws. I just broke people. Then came the second twist. Someone leaked a list. An internal file from my company. Not top secret, but not meant for public eyes. It had names, old classmates, former teachers, local officials, and notes next to each one. Notes like, Geller, Stephanie passive obstructionist, flagged for monitoring Marshall, Eric online behavior tracked, no engagement Cooper, Rachel subject to passive suppression protocol. The file wasn't proof of anything illegal. But it felt wrong to them. It felt like revenge. And it was. The internet lost its mind. People started debating whether I was a monster or a mastermind. Talk shows ran segments about me titled, The Girl Who Broke Her Hometown. A new article came out, this time in Wired, Delaney's Quiet War. They asked for a comment. I gave one sentence. They should have let me walk away. And then the third twist hit. Someone inside my company turned on me. Not a high-level exec. Just a mid-tier engineer who had been with me from year 2. Her name was Ashanti. I barely remembered hiring her, But she remembered me. She didn't go public, she went silent. Copied chunks of Foresight's code. Stripped the identifiers. Posted fragments online, letting people tear into it. It didn't expose the full system, but it gave outsiders a peek behind the curtain. Suddenly, journalists could see how deeply Foresight had its roots in public systems. How city budgets, school curriculums, even parole board policies were touched by our projections. They started calling it code-driven government, and they hated it. Still, I didn't stop, because I wasn't finished yet. Not until Quincy was gone from the maps. Not until the last person who remembered who I used to be saw what I'd become, and realized they helped build me. They say history is written by the winners. They're wrong. History is written by whoever owns the data. And I owned all of it. By the time I was 33, Foresight was in 17 federal systems. 7 European governments used our stripped-down version. Colleges built their entire forecasting models off our logic. People joked that you couldn't pass a city ordinance without checking if I'd blessed it. It wasn't a joke. Quincy was done. Population down to 6,200. School closed. Hospital bought out and moved 20 minutes south. It wasn't even called Quincy anymore. The Regional Planning Committee renamed it District 3 West under the Tri-State Development Act. You had to search pretty hard to find the name on a map. That was on purpose. Stephanie Geller quit her job after a nervous breakdown on air. She tried to write a memoir, tried to spin her connection to me into profit. No one bought it. Rachel Cooper moved to Springfield, remarried, and tried to run for a city council seat. My team funded her opponent. Quietly. Legally. She lost by 22 votes. Kinsey took a job in St. Louis as a hospital administrator. Last I heard, she was under review for falsifying patient satisfaction reports. I didn't get involved in that one. She did that to herself. Eric started a podcast. Called it Free Thinkers Midwest. It had 200 listeners, most of them bots. He claimed I was part of a secret cabal that controlled weather patterns and global policy. He wasn't wrong about the second part. But I made mistakes too. Ashanti, the engineer who leaked my code, didn't disappear. She founded her own company, a transparency platform, TruthLayer. Their whole mission was to make the invisible visible, to undo what I did. She got press, followers. Senators started quoting her. First I dismissed it, called it noise, but she was patient and smart. Like me, she didn't want to destroy Foresight. She wanted to infect it, expose the flaws, break the illusion of perfection. And one day she did. A city in Arizona used our projections to cut funding for certain neighborhoods. The logic made sense on paper. But TruthLayer pulled the data and found the algorithm had quietly weighed property values more than human need. Displaced over 2,000 people. The press went wild. Suddenly I wasn't a genius. I was dangerous. I was forced to testify again. This time it wasn't calm. This time they were angry. One senator said, "You created a monster. And now it's running wild." I answered, "I didn't create a monster. I showed you the one you were already feeding." But it didn't matter. The tide had turned. I was no longer the girl who rose from nothing. I was the woman who made the future bend too far. Investors pulled out. Contracts froze. My board turned on me. They tried to vote me out. I let them. And when I walked out of that building, I felt nothing. Because I already had what I wanted. Their world was built on my blueprints. My code still ran their systems. My logic still shaped their plans. They could fire me. They couldn't erase me. I disappeared for a while. Bought a quiet house in Montana.
No neighbors. No cameras.
Just a lake and silence. Sometimes people still talked about me. Panels. Podcasts. Documentaries. They'd say, "She was brilliant. But she went too far." They never said my name with love. Only with fear. But they said it. And that's what they said I'd never have. They told me I'd be forgotten. Now the maps are different. The language of policy includes words I invented. The calendar systems, traffic models, housing developments, they all carry my fingerprints. The future bent around a girl they laughed at. I never asked for revenge. I built it. And when the dust settled, I was all that remained. Because I may have made enemies, but I made the rules too. And in the end, It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving that I could rewrite the world they thought I'd never touch. And I did. One algorithm at a time.